And so we had about 7 people, and we get into the airport in Charlotte very late on last Friday night, and but we had a car reserved, one of these big 3-seaters, and we reserved it like 2 months in advance. Because I know this is something we absolutely had to have. We prepaid for it, everything. So we get off the plane, everyone's really tired. I go to the car rental place, and they say, "Oh, Mr. Gammon, I'm sorry, we don't have a car." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean you don't have a car? You've got the reservation, right?" I said, "Oh, yeah, we've got the reservation." And I'm like, "I prepaid, right?" Like, "Oh, yeah, you paid." I'm like, "Okay, well, wait a minute. How does this work?" And I was just trying to get to the bottom of what really happened. And really, the main takeaway here is they just didn't have any cars. They were short on cars, and more importantly, they were short on staff. Right? So then the next day, we go out and do our things, and then we go out to dinner that evening. And I ran across something I don't know that I've ever seen. We're at this restaurant, and it was a chain. It was a national chain. And we're there maybe 7 o'clock at night. And right when we got done eating, I saw that they put up a sign that just said, "We have no more food." I said, "How could you have no more food? Like it's not like a mom and pop place. This is a national chain." And I went there, and sure enough, they were short-staffed as well. So the next day, prior to NASCAR, we go to Jimmy John's. How many of you have been to Jimmy John's? Right? Yeah, everybody. And they're famous for making your sandwich in like 30 seconds. That's like their claim to fame. So we go in there and we all order. 1 hour later, we get the sandwich. And I go back, I'm like, "What's going on?" And you could tell this girl is stressed out of her mind. It's just they had 1 employee in the whole place. 1 employee. And she says, "We can't get anyone to work. We can't get anyone to work, and then when we do hire them, they don't show up. And those that do show up are stoned out of their mind." What are you going to do? Get your sandwich an hour later. So we saw this theme over and over and over again. And then when we drove down to Orlando from Charlotte, we had to get a different rental car. So I'm like, screw this, we go to a different place, we got a different reservation, completely different company. We go there, this would have been Monday morning, and what do you think they said? No cars. Like, wait a minute here. This is like deja vu. Do I have a reservation? Did I pay? Oh, yeah. We just don't have any cars. And then we went to the guy trying to get us a car, and you could tell that he was stressed out of his mind. Why? Because they didn't have anyone working. It just really, when you stay in the United States, it's kind of like looking at yourself in the mirror. You just don't notice these changes. But when you leave and come back once a year or once every 6 months, the change hits you right in the face. It's absolutely unbelievable. So one of the main conclusions or takeaways that I had, and one of the questions I was asking myself is, how can people afford to pay these prices? Oh, I forgot to tell you about the sandwich. Yeah, when I first got to the hotel, how many of you have been to the snack bar here? Yeah. How many of you people got sticker shock when you bought your candy bar, your sandwich? I go in there when we drove 7 hours to get down, and I get a little prepackaged sandwich, prepackaged salad, a bottle of water, and a little teeny cup of yogurt. All it'll be $55. And then it asks you for a tip. Then you got to tip them 15%. And she says, "Oh, do you want a bag?" I'm like, yeah, sure, that would be fine. So she takes a bag and just hands it to me. I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm supposed to put the stuff in here after I give you a 15% tip. So I'm sitting there asking myself, how on earth, if nobody is working, how is it that people can afford these prices? Like, there's a huge disconnect there for me. So, a lot of people say in the mainstream media, or you hear on social media, that, well, people are just checking out of the labor force. Okay, well, I get that. But when I was 25 years old, when I was 35 years old, I couldn't just check out of the labor force. Like, that wasn't an option. Because if I check out of the labor force, I check out of eating. Right? I check out of having a roof over my head. So there was this disconnect that I really tried to think through. So I did some research, got into the numbers. And there's a lot of variables, but these are some of the main drivers as to, I think, what we're seeing right now in the United States that's really highlighted by that Atlas Shrugged quote. So number one, I did not realize how extensive the PPP loans were. They're almost $1 trillion. And now they call them loans. But then when you look at it, you see that 95% of them were just forgiven. So you had $1 trillion of basically gifts that were going to people, for the most part, that were already rich, right? So this is a windfall for them. So they take that $1 million, they take that $2 million, and that does trickle down throughout the entire economy. And at least when you come to places like this doesn't represent the poor and the middle class, but when you come to places like this, they're going to be packed. They're going to rent all the cars. And then the prices of those cars are going to be lifted much, much higher. And then you've got government transfers, okay, or welfare. So what I did, because when I think of welfare, and let's see, Robert, could you do me a favor and grab my bag right here? Thanks. When I think of welfare, I think of just food stamps or something like that, but there's actually several categories. Now, I'm going to have to wait for Robert here because one thing I forgot to do is put on my glasses, so I can't see what that says. Thanks, buddy. But you'll notice, and if you guys can read these squares, that you've got not only food stamps, you not only have welfare, but then you also have things for just paying your utilities. There we go. Okay, so let's go through these here. We've got state social service agencies. We've got Social Security. We've got food assistance. We've got housing help. We've got help with utility bills. We've got welfare benefits, temporary assistance for the needy families. We have health insurance. And I could have added probably another 10 items there that if you know how to work the system, yet you can easily figure out how the system can pay you, let's say 50, 60 grand a year, especially if you have some kids. So we've got PPP, we've got government transfers, and then the next thing we have asset prices. So I was talking to Shane on the drive down here, Shane that was with Josh and I in Argentina, and he was telling me a story about how he's got some friends that are up in Vancouver, and their housing market is even crazier than ours. And he said he's got this buddy that's 30, 35 years old, and he's basically just living at home, working like 2 days a week. I'm like, well, why is he working 2 days a week? Because he says his job doesn't pay him enough to work. I'm like, oh, okay. But again, how is he like putting food on the table? It says because his parents are basically giving him money for his lifestyle. I said, okay, great. Well, where are his parents doing this? And why the hell are they doing this at 35, for heaven's sakes? But he's like, because their home price has gone up so much in value that they can just extract the equity from that house, and then that goes to pay the kid and pay his car note and pay for their vacation down to the United States or Mexico, etc. So you see all of this aggregate demand that is, again, trickling through the entire economy, which leads to the economic environment that we see. But then you have to ask the question, how did we get here? Like, how did we get to this point in time? Because then, if we understand the variables that brought us to this point, we can determine the probabilities of those variables continuing in the future, and then determine if what we see, this type of environment, is going to get better or if it's going to get worse. I think the question that really resonates with me, or what I try to think about when I'm looking at these government programs or looking at the United States, the West, really, is how do you increase your purchasing power? What is the incentive structure? And usually you would want people to increase their purchasing power by being more productive, producing more stuff, right? You guys have all watched my videos, and you've heard me say 1,000 times that wealth isn't measured by the amount of gold you have or Bitcoin or silver or any of these things. Wealth is measured by how much stuff, how many goods and services a society can produce efficiently. I always use that example of being stranded on a desert island, and you've got a chest full of $1 billion worth of gold. Okay, great. Are you rich or are you poor? You're poor because the only thing else that you have is a coconut, some sand and some salt water. That gold won't get you anything.